I have today with me Mandeep Singh, the co-founder of Mindscan Education. What percentage of children applying with you?
For us, it's almost 80 to 85% applying after class 12 and about 15 odd percent who doing the graduation in India and going abroad.
Has there been a preferred favorite destination that they've been looking at?
The US is still the largest destination. Once a child goes outside, the child has to be willing to look at part-time work opportunities.
One word that describes a successful applicant.
Well lopsided.
One mistake that almost every student makes during the application process.
They don't leave enough time for their essays.
One piece of advice that you give every parent.
Be clear on what you want from your child's higher education journey, and definitely don't try and live your dreams through them.
Welcome back to Let's Chat with GB, and today is going to be a super special episode. If you have someone who is in his teens or her teens between the ages of 12 to 17 and is looking at a study abroad or a good college study option, well then this podcast is for you. If you already have a child, niece or a nephew who's already in college, this episode is still for you. I have today with me Mandeep Singh, one of the most trusted, one of the most known names in this particular space, the co-founder of Mindscan Education, someone who is working with top CEOs, celebrities, politicians. Even our children are actually being coached by him in this particular space. Mandeep, it is an absolute pleasure to have you on Let's Chat with GB.
Thank you, Gaurav. Great to be here on the Let's Chat with GB show. Awesome.
And thank you for taking your time. This is such a busy time for you. You're flooded with applications. You're flooded with a whole bunch of pressure. Exam results just came out.
Yeah.
How are things going for you at this point in time?
So, as you said, yes, it is a crazy time. CBSE results came out just yesterday, but there's always an opportunity to take out time to discuss, to reach out to a larger audience, understand what people are thinking. Yeah. So it was great to be, as I said, great to be on the show.
Awesome. And, and like I said, one trusted name. Thank you for of course, helping, our family, in college education, planning and all of that. And Nirvan is finally in college. So thank you for that as well. Truly, it's a space where trust bears, such an important part, because, we're really having to lay bare, where we are, personally, professionally, our children's aspirations. Correct. And more. What have been some of your, big learnings in this particular space?
So Gaurav, I'd like to just start with my backstory itself. And I think a lot of what you said, the trust does come from there. So having worked for about 12, 13 years before Ishmeet, my wife and I, we started Mindscan. Yeah. Dealt at close quarters with so many people, dealt with a lot of entrepreneurs who were working with the companies where I was employed. Right. I think the one aspect that we realized is the importance of relationships. Whether you're working in a financial services company, you're working in a consumer durable company. Right. I remember one of our very big agents when I was at Tata AG said this, कि sir, आप तो visiting card change कर सकते हो. कह जी मेरे ऑफिस के बाहर जो name board है ना, वो change नहीं होता. Yeah. And those are the kind of learnings that I credit for my realization that relationships and trust are important. Right. Family values, of course, credit to my parents and the family. So that's something that perhaps has come naturally to the two of us. Yeah. But also having been involved in the education. So Ishmeet has been in education since 2003. Right. Seeing the hopes and aspirations that parents come to us with, yeah, and understanding what's at stake. In so many other businesses, Gaurav, you miss a deadline, there's another chance. So true. You miss up today, you can do something again tomorrow. There's another client. Right. But here you're really talking of a kid's life. So true. Missing a deadline, filling a wrong form, taking a wrong decision is normally not something you can turn back. So I think that's something that we've realized from day one. And the rest of it is common sense and, good wishes of everyone, I guess.
Right. Very, very modest. And like I said, I know some of the, people that you've been helping and some of the big successes that you've had. Yeah. So again, kudos to both Ishmeet and
Thank
yourself.
You.
So what are you seeing, this year? It is, obviously, tumultuous year, globally, there's a lot happening.
Correct.
We've heard about things in US, Canada. There have been areas, but I'd say pockets of, issues in other parts of the world as well. So what have you been seeing amongst parents and children, this year? Has there been a preferred favorite destination that they've been looking at?
So first things, yes, there is a lot of uncertainty. People are worried. Preferred destination, if one looks at the overall data, the US is still the largest destination.
Right.
UK has caught up a lot in the previous years. In fact, maybe in some markets, UK may be the largest
Right.
destination today.
Right.
But I think what's important, Gaurav, is that once you peel away the uncertainty, because that's going to be there in some form or the other at all times.
Agreed.
It's important to focus on which market or which college and also what subjects
Right.
make the most sense for you or for your child.
Right.
If you've got that homework going correct,
Yeah.
then these challenges should not
Right.
trouble you so much.
Agreed.
Can they give you a couple of sleepless nights? Yes, they can. And we've seen a lot of that right now.
Of course.
But the other thing that has happened is there's a lot of newer markets that are now opening up to Indian students. Europe, in my opinion, was always a gem which was waiting to be discovered. Still some great options there.
Right.
But even within Asia, Singapore is a name that in India we're very familiar with.
Sure.
Malaysia has some great options. Dubai has coming up recently.
Right.
But even South America is there. There's some good universities. Within Europe, places like Portugal have some amazing universities. The Baltic countries have some amazing universities. Countries that we perhaps would not even dream of, or we may not even plan to go on a holiday. Hungary,
Sure.
Czech Republic, Poland, some great universities. So I think what is important is the preparation to really understand what works for me,
Right.
and then see what really fits in.
100%. I totally love that where you said that, certainty will be there, but it's all about, what are your aspirations, what are your long-term goals?
Right.
Bumps will, come, and
Absolutely.
we've seen that happen as well. So some of these countries where you mentioned, where you said Latin America, for example, Eastern Europe, for example, is English, is that not an impediment language-wise in some of these countries?
Okay, so let's start with the less problematic ones. So the Baltic countries, English is not that big a problem.
Right.
They even offer a lot of bachelor's programs in English, and a lot of work also does happen in English, because I think it's a factor of they're small markets.
Right.
So for a lot of things, they do attract international talent.
Yeah.
So whether a guy from Poland comes to Latvia and he has to speak in Polish or English, it's the same thing. So
Sure.
English becomes a common ground.
Right. Right.
In Eastern Europe, Latin America, yes. In fact, in many parts of Europe. So the way things are today as far as the higher education sector is, at the bachelor's level,
Right.
very few programs taught in English.
Right.
But at the master's level, because there the canvas really opens up,
Right.
I would say it could be 50-60% of programs taught in English. And it's not just about teaching opportunities.
Right.
It's also about what does the child do outside the classroom, internships, etc.
Right.
So at the master's level, not that big a challenge.
Interesting. And, while, we will get into this at a later point, what percentage of children applying with you are applying for overseas in the undergraduate space, and what percentage for postgrad?
So for us, we are, almost opposite what the overall market is. For us, it's almost 80 to 85% applying after class 12, and about 15% who doing the graduation in India and going abroad.
Right.
I think that has to do with our own philosophy, where we believe that the longer the child gets exposure to that ecosystem,
Nice.
they're really building up their chances of success, because they understand what works over there. They understand opportunities that they could not even imagine sitting over here.
Right.
Jitna marzi aap internet pe research kar lo, Gaurav. But nothing beats being there.
100%.
They'll interact with kids from different backgrounds. They'll learn so much more. So that's really our story at Mindscan, about 80-85% after class 12.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And I like the philosophy where you said that, more exposure externally is good, because the interesting part is that you and I are both boarding school
Yeah,
kids.
absolutely. I was about to say the same thing.
But you have children today where when you tell them that, our kids have gone to boarding school, they're like horrified. Like,
Correct.
Kids have gone to boarding school, what were you thinking? So I think kids today have far less exposure than, our generation did.
Absolutely.
And I think that you're right. That, if they actually do head out earlier, it's actually a lot better for them.
They're more adaptable.
Yeah.
They don't have preconceived notions. They're not scared to try new things. By the time they are 21, 22, depending on various backgrounds, family, etc., many kids think that they've arrived in life. They think they know everything. And that's dangerous.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
So let's say now someone in India is planning to apply for a top college. Now, okay, let's say Ivy Leagues or maybe a step below. When in earnest do they actually start preparing themselves, for that particular journey? Like, when does the entire preparation start?
So we like to break it up into 3 stages.
Okay.
The first is, let's say, from class 6 to class 8 or so. The best word that comes to mind is unstructured observation.
Right.
Just like what you and I perhaps did, Gaurav, when we were young.
Right.
We did everything. I mean, in boarding school, you played hockey for the first time. You did triple jump also. You did everything.
Yeah.
You participated in a debate competition because the house captain came and said, "Boss, aur koi nahi hai, aaja."
100%.
So you got exposed to so many things.
Yeah.
And that sparked the first inclination or dislike for that particular thing. So class 6 to 8, allow your child to explore stuff. Don't monitor them too much. Don't try and put too many barriers.
Right.
If as a parent you've observed them during that time, you've hopefully managed to narrow down to 3-4 things which you say this kid has a spark, this kid would actually enjoy. Class 9 and 10 is where you dig deeper. Make that kid do a research program on that. Make them do a shadow someone in that industry. Maybe do a summer school where, something in that. Read more books. Your family, which is well connected, expose them. Let him understand better those 3 or 4 options.
Right.
And by the end of class 10 in a traditional CBSE, ICSE setup, where I need to then decide what subjects, that is when you really need to dovetail it into saying, okay, ye padna hai, and you go all in. So while in class 6 to 8, as I said, is very unstructured, but you're laying the foundation.
Sure.
Class 9 and 10 is critical for you to ensure that you don't feel later, I wish I had done this.
Right.
What if I had started learning the tabla instead of doing karate?
Sure.
Do that in class 9 and 10.
Right.
So simple answer to question, I would say class 9 is a great time to start with some focus.
Right.
But obviously the kid gives you a lot of data points from an earlier age. Parents need to be open to it.
Right.
Don't have preconceived notions.
Yeah.
And see what your child's strengths are pointing towards.
Very interesting. If you're listening in, so class 6, we're talking about even as young as 11 or 12, you have to start having, at least opening your mind to what your possibilities are. By 13, 14, 15, you have a path. And of course, it's game time once they're actually in class 11 or 12. Very interesting. And obviously, when we are talking about some of the top colleges globally, applications are coming in from around the world, right?
Yeah.
I know you have very, very hungry Chinese kids, for example. And
True.
I hear a lot about, the amount that they've started prepping, maybe from the age of 4 or 5, even earlier, right? So globally, very competitive as well, right? And which are some of the other countries where you're seeing really, large number of applications coming in for some of these top colleges?
This is a segment that changes over the years. Till a few years back, China was the largest exporter of kids.
Right.
That's gone down. Today, in most of the bigger education markets, India is the number 1 segment, but South Asia is a big contributor. Within Africa, countries like Nigeria and Egypt do have a lot of kids going abroad. In the ASEAN belt, Philippines is one country that I think has a lot of students going outside to study. Within Europe, of course, there's a lot of mobility. And interestingly, if I remember the statistic correctly, almost 8% of international students in Europe, international students itself is about 20-odd%, but 8% is not insignificant.
Yeah.
It's actually US students who are going there to study. So it's not just about saying कि यार यहाँ university अच्छी है बुरी है. It's about saying, can I step out of my comfort zone and learn something more? I've done this, can I do something else? And then can I combine those experiences?
Right.
So there could be various reasons, various factors that actually drive this decision to go outside India and study.
Okay.
And that's critical to understand.
Yeah. And is there one country that really stands out, in your mind, which is really with open arms welcoming Indians right now?
I think, Gaurav, credit to all the previous generations, India is a country that is very well received internationally. We have a reputation for being clean, honest, hardworking, etc., etc. Unlike some other countries that basically go out and take lots of pangas.
Sure.
So I don't think there is a challenge in terms of any country saying we don't want Indians. And that's reflecting the fact that we're consistently amongst the top 3, 4, maybe since the 80s or 90s.
Right.
And today, whether it's US, UK, Canada, even Australia, a large number of Indian students are going. But even these non-traditional markets within Europe, ourselves, we are seeing a lot of interest in Europe.
Right.
Yes, every market has its own challenges. And you mentioned earlier about the English language. Yeah, we may not recommend going to Europe at the bachelor's level to too many students.
Right.
But these are all countries that are very open to taking Indian students. And that's also reflected in the activities that they're doing, whether they have an in-country representative or their teams do come down here. They interact with schools, they interact with students, they're holding webinars.
Right.
So all those things point to the fact that they recognize that India has a lot of talent. We have some bright kids. And these are people who are aspirational. These are people who are willing to step out of their comfort zone and look at the best that the world has to offer.
Right. And I think the overall, economic situation is really helping. I mean, again, if we go back, 20, 30, 40 years, to get your child to go abroad was, almost unaffordable. Yes,
True.
Banks were giving some kind of, funding, but most people were dependent, I guess, a lot on scholarships back in the day.
Correct.
I think now you have a lot of people who are saying, okay, scholarship na bhi mili, so, we can go to the bank or, we'll beg, borrow, steal, but we'll
Correct.
make it happen, right? What's really changed in that space, let's say over the last 15, 20 years in terms of the financing aspect of higher education?
So two aspects, Gaurav. The first is the exposure that the parents themselves have had. So a lot of people our age, couple of years older and younger, whether it's work or it's their own businesses, they're traveling a lot more extensively. Children at a much younger age are traveling internationally as well. So they understand and they start assimilating what's really going on.
Right.
Now, because they are traveling, they're better off. So a larger portion of people are able to afford sending kids. At the same time, banks are always looking at newer avenues.
Right.
So till a few years back, it was primarily public sector banks that would give education loans. Private sector was more like a glorified personal loan. So it was a higher interest rate, but they may brand it as an education loan. But today, there are a lot of specialized players in the market who do only education loans. There are loans with collateral, unsecured loans. I've heard of many banks who have lists depending on their own experiences and maybe drawn from rankings,
Right.
wherein they say, yahan to, we'll give you an option to start a delayed payment of EMIs, etc., etc. Because they realize that a person who is taking that leap of faith
Right.
and qualifies as a good quality risk or a good quality asset in their books, they're willing to take that call on them, and they realize that this is a person who can open up many more avenues. So from a relationship perspective for the bank,
Right.
it's a very good age to catch that student and say, let's start a relationship.
Yeah,
So-
and then I think even for their future earnings and salary
Yeah,
accounts, etc.,
absolutely.
there is a bond.
There is a
that's gonna
relationship
remain.
that develops. So I think the overall financial services have become a lot more open to this segment. They realize there is a huge demand. They realize that there are good guys going out there.
Right.
And they also realize that there is so much potential for their business growth, piggybacking on this soft power of the diaspora that you're sending out.
Agreed. And I think very interesting that the fact that you've had such a large, long background in financial services as well. I think even when someone does come, a parent does come and have this conversation with you, I think that becomes another added feather in your cap where you're able to give them expert financial advice as well.
Yeah. So I won't call it expert, Gaurav, honestly, but I think we're able to add some perspective to it. Fortunately or unfortunately, at Mindscan, I think almost 99% of the parents who come to us do not need loans.
Right.
They do fund it themselves. But yes, basics of financial planning, because that's a very important thing when it comes to education. Even within India, when you see some of the private universities, they're expensive now.
Yeah.
So parents do need to plan judiciously for that.
Right.
So that definitely is a conversation that we have with people who come to us for assessments, maybe in class 9,
Right.
irrespective of whether they're talking of going outside India or they're just talking of sending their child to the best possible place. We definitely leave that thought in their mind that plan your finances as well.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Is there a particular percentage that a bank or a financial institution can go up to fund? So, and also a ballpark interest rate that someone should be looking at when they're having a conversation with a financier?
Interest rate, I would not hazard a guess at all. In terms of the percentage of the requirement, which is typically tuition and all, we've seen, banks are willing to cover the complete tuition fees. That's really not a challenge.
Right.
There are some cases, it could be university specifics if the bank says these are great universities.
Right.
We've heard of cases wherein they're even willing to fund tuition, some living. But the interesting part, Gaurav, also is that while there are these banks and financial services, there are also what we call third-party scholarships. So you have, the Tatas have a trust, the Aga Khan Foundation.
Right.
So these are also people who've put aside money, and they even go to the extent of funding your return ticket once a year, etc., etc. So I think for anyone to come back and say, because of financial reasons, I did not pursue this path.
Right.
Maybe a tad unfair.
Right.
Yes, it requires you to do more research,
Sure.
but avenues are there and they're only increasing.
And if we talk about now, let's take a look at ballpark commercials. Now again, let's take a top tier US college, all right, and someone's heading across there for their undergrad. What kind of budgeting should they be doing in terms of tuition, staying, maybe some other expenses, also maybe occasional travel back? What kind of commercials are we looking at there?
What we advise parents when you look at a good US university today at the current exchange rate, you're looking at a tuition fees of about 45 lakh a year, 45 lakh rupees a year. Living for a year, board lodging is close to 14-15 lakh rupees a year.
They're on campus or off campus?
Mostly what I'm talking of is on campus. Off campus could go either ways depending on what you want to do.
Right.
Also, a lot of universities prefer / mandate that first year international students need to be on campus, and also it makes sense.
Correct.
You understand what all is available on campus,
right,
and also it's safer.
Right.
So that's the ballpark as far as tuition fees and living.
Right.
The only thing in addition to this would be your travel
back and forth.
But also what different countries have different models. The US has these calculators that are there on the website, and at that at a later stage, but when you get admission, they give you a very nice document which even says approximate books ka itna kharcha hoga, ye hoga. So before you decide and say, okay, I'm definitely going here, they give you a clear idea ki boss, roughly aapka itna paisa kharch hoga.
Sure.
And they have calculators on their website, people can go through it. But I think anyone going to a good or targeting a good US university, Gaurav, should be looking at about 60 to 65 lakh rupees per year as their cost at the current exchange rates.
Right. Yeah, that does kind of make sense, because I think conversations we've been having with friends who've had kids there, I think they're like, again, as you mentioned, it's up to how fancy they want their accommodation to be and their lifestyle, etc. So if you're listening in, anywhere from 60 lakh rupees to a crore is what you're looking at across for the US over the course of a year. Now, let's say if the US was 100, all right, as a unit, Europe, so let's say the UK, maybe then parts of Central Europe, going all the way down to Australia and Singapore. So how would you rate the the costs in that case? If US was 100, where would these other 3-4 be?
Okay, a comparable UK university would be approximately 20 to 30% less than the UK.
Got it.
But then 20 to 30% less than the US.
Yeah.
The other thing that you have to realize is, whereas the US is a 4-year degree,
Right.
UK is 3 years. So your overall cost is going to be comparatively substantially lower.
Right.
Europe is a different ballgame altogether. So even a country like Netherlands, which has some great universities, an average bachelor's would be about 12-13 lakh rupees a year. Even if you were to take living costs or something, you're still in the ballpark of about 20 lakh rupees. Whereas you spoke of the US being around 45 plus 15. So substantially, it's a huge thing. Canada, Australia, some of their top universities are expensive. They may be even more expensive than some of the top UK universities. But you will get options at, in the Canada and UK. So again, by your metric of if US is 100, you'll get a lot of good Canadian and Australian universities at about 60, 70, 75. Good options. Europe, as I already told you, Europe is by far the most economical.
Really?
But you have to look at all variables and see whether it makes sense or not.
Interesting. Good to know.
But one thing which I want to add on financials, Gaurav, is that once a child goes outside, the child has to be willing to look at part-time work opportunities.
Right.
Now, part-time work doesn't mean कि यार Pizza Hut में ही काम करना है. Part-time could be on campus where you're actually working with your faculty member, you're actually helping them with something they're doing.
And while you're volunteering, there'll actually be a pay.
Yes, absolutely. You get paid.
Right.
Part-time work could include other things on campus. So we have quite a few students who end up joining the international recruitment team. So it's called student recruitment.
Right.
Wherein they become student ambassadors. They may be conducting webinars, or they are hand-holding students when they actually join in for the first week, 10 days, 20 days. They're buddies and all. So that is almost a year-long initiative activity that kids are involved in.
Nice.
So there are lots of opportunities
And
for
that sounds
students to earn.
comfortable too, as a thing to do rather than, going out and waiting tables.
Absolutely.
Or, working at a bar or,
You're right.
Yeah.
And the other thing, stepping back what we spoke about earlier, you are also going out to step outside your comfort zone. If you're just going to say, boss, मैं बस यहाँ आऊँगा, पढ़ूंगा, party करूँगा, you're losing out on what that ecosystem has to offer.
Agreed.
That's also an avenue of income
Right.
versus setting off expense.
Yeah.
And as a family, you should decide how you want your child to do that.
Again, very useful insights. So the US is 100 then rupees, let's say, as a multiple. Then you're looking at about 80 in the UK, down to even 60, 50 when it comes to some of the other markets as well. Interestingly, having a conversation, with our son, who you also assisted, and initially, we were going down a direction where we were looking at something overseas.
Correct.
Before he comes back and says, no, I want to stay in India, for whatever being the logic. But he said that in his school, and his schools are fairly forward, thinking, relatively global, atmosphere. But he said still amongst 80% of the kids, they had no doubt that they were going abroad and they pursued that path. But he said even amongst the 20% that were there, he says many of them were very certain they wanted to stay in India as well. When you're having conversations with parents, what is now bringing this thing that, okay, India's got some interesting, college options and let's explore India. What are you hearing and seeing in this space?
Now, this is a conversation that lots of parents have with us, Gaurav, that let's look at bachelors in India and depending on how things go, masters ke liye bahar bhejenge. Now, one, it makes a lot of sense. The child is more mature. The child will perhaps have more clarity after 3-4 years of education. Right. And obviously, financially, 1 year versus 3 years or 4 years. Personally, we don't buy into that logic. And as I shared, 80-25% of the kids. Yeah. But a very interesting statistic that I'd like to share, till about 2 years back when the overseas Chinese movement just imploded. Right. China was sending, if 100 kids went out, 60% were for masters, but 40% were for bachelors. Now, the inference I draw from that, Gaurav, is see how China has grown, advanced over the last 30 odd years. Right. In my opinion, one of the very strong reasons could be the foundational skills that this chunk of kids who are stepping out after class 12 are building in. Whether they've come back after that, whether they stayed on there and it's, brain redrain or whatever. But fact is, you have to understand, do not look at it only as a cut and dry thing ki ji, graduation ke baad jayenge. Understand, step back. What is my aim? Right. You are expecting a child to go to a new ecosystem after graduation for 1 year. She needs to settle down there. She needs to understand the teaching methodologies. She needs to do well because loan liya hai, kharcha hai, jo bhi hai. And at the end of it, she needs to land up a job. Do they manage? Of course they do. The success stories are all there. But let's understand from the IITs versus the rest of the universe. Right. The number of kids who go from the IITs are not even going to be in high single digits if you look at the whole market. Okay. A very large percentage of students from India who end up going after masters do face challenges. And challenges could be of various types. But the probability that they would have been better equipped, they would have been better acclimatized, they would have a better understanding of the system if they had gone after class 12 is undeniable.
Interesting. Yeah. Good to know. So I'd love to get into, more conversations pertaining to, what are universities looking at and certain other stuff. But I thought let's do a little bit of a rapid fire prior to that. So I'm going to be asking you a whole bunch of questions and in a word or two, maybe max a sentence, just the first thing that comes to you. Okay. All right. Ready for the rapid fire?
Yeah, sure. Right. Sounds interesting. Do I get a hamper at the end of it?
Of course. Goodie hamper coming your way after this for sure. So first up, Ivy League or Oxbridge? Which one would be for you?
Ivy League.
All right. SAT or ACT? Which one do you recommend prepping for?
Indifferent, but for someone who's stronger in mathematics, maybe ACT could be a better choice.
Okay. One word that describes a successful applicant.
Well lopsided.
Okay, well lopsided. Interesting. Biggest red flag in an application?
Overconfidence, arrogance, I know it all.
Grades or grit? Which one is it for you?
Grit any day, Gaurav.
All right. Best country right now for an undergraduate education, and I want to put you in the spot. Let's say for Fateh, who's your son, but outside the US.
Outside the US. So UK would definitely be up there. But given the way that higher education system is today, Netherlands, I think, is a great choice.
All right. One mistake that almost every student makes during the application process.
During the application process, I think they don't leave enough time for their essays. They don't realize how much time and thought goes into college application essays.
So true.
You have to plan for that.
Okay, geographically, school-wise, North India or South India, who is preparing their students better?
I think South India any day. Just leave it at that. Safer answer.
All right, South India any day. One piece of advice that you give every parent.
Be clear on what you want from your child's higher education journey, and definitely don't try and live your dreams through them.
Oh, brilliant. One book you wish every high schooler would read.
There's a book called Freakonomics, which talks about application of economics in the real world. Brilliant read.
100% agree. Okay, if you were given a time machine, one college that you would go back to as a student in a heartbeat.
So I've just been to the US, Gaurav, so those are top of mind. So I'd go with Princeton.
Awesome. Lovely campus. You've
Yeah.
been in the area, so 100% agree. LinkedIn or Instagram, which platform are students underestimating?
Underestimating LinkedIn. It's a very powerful platform, especially if you're targeting the top universities. Use LinkedIn wisely. As a class 11 kid, class 10 kid, there is a lot you can do on LinkedIn.
Okay. One interview question that mostly always stumps students.
I think it's the simple ones, really. Why do you want to come to this college? Well, that shows how well prepared you are, how well you've searched at college. But I think the one that most kids find it difficult to answer, whether in the application or in an interview, why do you want to study this major?
Yeah.
They end up giving very superfluous answers. It shows a lack of understanding of their own subject.
One buzzword that annoys you and should be banned from college essays.
One buzzword that annoys me. I think people are overdoing some extracurricular activities. They feel that, those are the end all of the world. What comes to mind right now is the MUNs. I think people overestimate what an MUN can do, or let's put it the other way, people don't realize what an MUN can do, and thus they end up thinking, "Bas ji ek certificate mil gaya, bahut hai." So people will end up writing MUN kiya.
And
Doesn't
MUN
just
being
work.
the Model United Nations.
Model United Nations, yes.
All right,
Thank you for...
awesome. Yeah. Okay, so gap year, game changer or time waster?
It's a very tricky one. We've had a couple of students who've done amazingly well after the gap year. So if I have to pick, I'll say it's a waste of time, because you have to be very clear. You have to plan it very well. It's difficult. All your friends are going off to college, and here you are still going through the grind. How do you keep yourself motivated? How do you keep your spirits up?
Yeah.
So it's not for everyone.
AI in applications, and I know ChatGPT is absolutely everywhere right now. So friend, foe, or future?
It is the future, but I think like a lot of technology, Gaurav, ultimately it's up to me. I can use it today and maybe get by. But what am I going to do tomorrow when, the rubber has to hit the road?
Yeah. All right. So last 2 or 3 of them. A student story that still gives you goosebumps.
Okay, so I'd like to go with this one. So very good school in Delhi. So schools have all these clubs, kids get an opportunity. For some reason, this school did not have a psychology club. And over the last many years, psychology has become a very popular career choice.
Right.
And this kid signed up with us in grade 10. And I remember almost in every fortnightly call, she would be fighting with me almost. I went and I said, why can't we have a psychology club? And finally, towards the end of class 11, she managed to convince the school to have a psychology club. And the kind of work that she did through the psychology club, how she showed the interrelation of psychology with business, economics, etc., that's something which I think is true grit. We spoke of grit earlier. That's something that just the perseverance and the way she kept at it, really phenomenal.
It really helped her overall application.
Yeah, absolutely it did. Absolutely.
She's in a great college now.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, one quote that you live by when you're guiding your students.
That's a tough one. I don't know whether it's a quote or not, but I believe Barack Obama said this, and that's something I use. It says, recognize the urgency of now. So the way I interpret it for the family and the children is, once you've decided कि आपने बाहर जाना है, then pull out all stops. Till the time you haven't decided, take as much time as you want, ask all the questions, speak with friends, families, well-wishers, but don't second guess yourself once you decide. Recognize that now is the time, go all in.
Love that. if admissions were a sport, okay, which one would it be?
It's a team game, definitely. A team game with one clear hero, which is the student. So I don't know. Which team game has a clear hero? Maybe basketball, I don't know.
Okay, probably basketball.
Yeah.
And the last one, if you could get dinner with any one university dean in the world, which university would this dean be from?
At the moment, given the way everything is, I'd love to meet someone from Australia because I think they're doing some great stuff.
Yeah.
The way they're approaching international education, the way they're looking at international students seems to be a very well-balanced approach.
Right.
Definitely understand what's going on in their mind, what do they see happening over the next 15, 20 years, and how they see international students integrating into the Australian landscape.
Awesome. Love it. So there you had it. Some brilliant questions on the rapid fire. Some great answers, of course. And hope you found that part of the pod useful. All right. So getting back from the rapid fire, okay, let's get back to some other very pressing questions that people may have. So one of them is when an application comes in. All right. How important are the three aspects? And we're talking about one is obviously the grades that the person achieved. Second is the extracurricular activities that they've been doing outside, and the third is just the personality of the person that comes through either in the application or in the interview.
Right.
How do you want to break this up?
So Gaurav, it's like this. Ultimately, we have to realize we are applying for an educational degree. So grades are going to be important.
Right.
What is more important or equally important, what you've scored is the consistency. And that's somewhere where I feel a lot of Indian students end up losing out because we have this habit of peaking in grade 10, crashing in grade 11, ki ji chutti hai, and trying to go up in grade 12.
Right.
So that lack of consistency is definitely a big factor, and that's something that needs to be avoided at all costs.
Right.
Extracurriculars, it's important to understand why do universities look at extracurricular.
Right.
So one is they're saying we want to understand, do you actually know what you're studying? Do you understand how you can apply that knowledge? How does it actually go out in the real world and get applied?
Right.
What are the various variables that come into play? So extracurriculars come there, or something which you actually call supercurriculars, related to your curriculum.
Sure.
So you do a project, you do some internship, which is related to the subject you want to study. Extracurriculars, whether it's sports, it's your debating, it's Model United Nations, it's community service, etc.
Right.
These come into the area which is something about leadership, something about the younger generation taking their place in the world today. Do you have it in you to actually go out and create an impact?
Right.
Why is that important? Because these top universities realize that you are going to be an ambassador for their university once you leave.
Right.
What is the type of person they want carrying their flag for eternity?
Yep. Yep.
That's a very important thing to understand. If you don't understand why extracurriculars are important,
Right.
you're just going to go back to saying, "Acha ji, mere paas certificates to hai ji, what's the problem?" It's not about the certificates.
Yeah.
It's about the experiences you've lived through and what have you learned from them that comes through the extracurricular. Personality, yes, interviews are there. With the advent of technology, many universities are going in for what one could call recorded interviews.
Right.
They want to get some face time with the student.
Right.
And what they're really looking at is clarity of thought. Why do you want to come to us? Why do you want to study this? What are your future plans? They're looking for that.
Right.
The other thing that they really want to understand is get to know the student better. Marks tells us one side of the story.
Right.
But what is it that you are outside the classroom?
Yeah.
Do you play an instrument? Is there something unique about your family that is impacting you? Are you someone who comes from a particular geographical area?
Sure.
So those are all things that colleges are looking at. Why are they looking at? Again, it's not just about saying diversity is a buzzword.
Right.
It's about saying that if my classroom and if my entire student cohort is diverse, it is heterogeneous,
Right.
I'm giving those many more opportunities to them to learn about newer things, understand perspectives, become more well-balanced human beings. We've all heard this term, Gaurav, 21st century skills. If you break it down, okay, AI is, or how to handle data is important.
Right.
But everything else about 21st century skills about relationships. How do you deal with each other?
Yeah.
And that's really something that colleges look at.
Right.
So these three things are important. Yes, you'll have a mix. There will be some kids who will be picked up only for grades, just like there'll be a kid who will be picked up because he's won a youth Olympic medal.
Right.
But they bring so much more to the table. So understand what works for you, understand your passions, And when we spoke earlier about starting our preparation, class 6, class 9, it's not just academics, it's all these things. You could be playing an instrument, you could be playing chess, you could be a voracious reader.
Yeah.
They
All of
want
these
to
things are
know
gonna
you.
make you stand out.
Yes, absolutely.
But tell me this, okay? Suppose someone walks into Mindscan, and the grades are not the best. Okay, extracurricular to tha hi nahi. Personality is so-so, and now heart to heart that okay, this is going to be really tough.
Right.
What at this point? What chances does this person have? I'm not saying top grade college, but that's not happening. But how high should an applicant like this actually be aiming for? To get it, and where should they be really trying to get into?
Okay, so first thing, this happens every year, Gaurav.
Of course.
And that's where it's important to understand the fit. Because it's no use landing up at the best university, but not fitting in there, because then a very large number of kids do end up dropping out of there as well.
Right.
So that fit is important.
Yeah.
Now, when you said, a kid like this may not go into the top ranked universities, let's look at the top 500 universities in the world.
Sure.
Now, 500 may seem like, yaar, kaun jayega, but please understand, just the US has over 4,000 colleges and universities. India has close to 2,000. So, top 500 in the world is a great list. Okay. There are countries that are so small, Gaurav, which have 7, 8, 10 universities ranked in the top 500 in the world.
Wow.
Okay. A country like Malaysia, okay, they have those universities. Portugal, we spoke,
Correct.
Portugal has universities. I spoke about, we've sent students to the Baltic countries and all. These are universities that may not be the top 100, but these are countries that made sense for them. Because your academics are not great for whatever reason, but do you have it in you to push yourself and say, Jo ho gaya, now I am willing to make a new start. Yes, I would want to land up at Harvard, example. I want to be the best. Today I'm here. I can either try and jump here in one go, but if I realize ki nahi boss, it's going to be a longer journey, it's better to take few steps rather than just crib for the rest of my life. Ki ji main us time nahi ja paya to main kuch bhi nahi karunga. So there's some great places, Gaurav. And in fact, even in India, there's some great universities. The newer universities are coming up. We have some overseas universities coming in here. So in terms of opportunities, I don't think this younger generation is going to be at a challenge. It's about doing your homework and understanding what works for you.
And I love the Indian perspective that you mentioned. I mean, I remember when I was heading into college, I went to Bhagat Singh, and I walked into first, I think it was the history honors class. And this friend and I, we walk in there and we see that there's too many guys, and we're walking by this other class and we see a lot of girls, and it's English honors. We're like, nahi yaar, English honors karte hain. Right? So it was as easy as that. So the reason why I did English honors is because we had more girls and less guys, and that was our reason for actually picking. But so much has changed in the Indian education scenario as well. Right? So what are some of the top trends that you're seeing in India, and some developments that you're seeing in Indian colleges, in the Indian higher education system as well?
So I'll start this, Gaurav, by going back to what you said. Unfortunately, that still happens today. Kids choose subjects, choose colleges for the craziest of reasons. And I think that's human psychology. That's not going to change. But one trend or one thing that has definitely come up is the acceptance or the openness to the non-science streams as well. So psychology as a career, as a subject is becoming extremely popular. People are starting to understand what is political science. Okay, people are understanding the interplay of things like politics and economics. We get every year, was, as you're aware, Ishmeet, my wife, she's a NIFT graduate. We get a lot of kids every year who go to the top design schools globally. So design and the creative film production, music, fine arts. These are courses, careers that people are more open about. And I think a lot of it has to do with the willingness of parents to back their child. We've seen our child doing well. Why can't we back him? I've worked so hard. Agar main ye bhi nahi kar sakta bachche ke liye, what the hell? So it is an ecosystem that evolves. But these are definitely things. Of course, the craze for computers is not going to die down anytime soon. And in a way that's scary, because people who perhaps are not the best suited for that are also running after that, but that's a different story altogether. But it's good to see a lot of new subjects, new courses being offered. I'm forgetting which university, but there's a university that actually offers a program in theatre and psychology in India. Great combination. And those are the kind of things that hopefully we'll see a lot more of.
Might actually even be career for all you know, because
Yeah,
I think
could
that
be.
may have been one of the reasons why Nirvan did apply there. Because,
Yeah.
theatre was one of his
Correct.
picks. Interesting podcast I listened to this morning, and this is on the Diary of a CEO podcast, and there were three people, and they're talking about AI, the impact of AI in the world that we now live in, and how within 24 hours, 24 years, AI will actually make many jobs redundant.
Correct.
So, is there something that you're also mindful of and telling applicants that just be aware that this is an area that AI is going to really come and disrupt, and it's something that you may not have an opportunity in the future. So, is that kind of conversation happening, or still too early for that?
No, we have to be mindful of what technology can do, Gaurav, and I'd like to answer this question in two ways. The first is, let's just look at the last 24 years, for example.
Right.
And if you just look at from the aspect of the top companies in the world and how those have changed from, earlier they were the brick and mortar companies, the Gs and all of the world. And today they are more tech enabled services companies.
Right.
So obviously the skill set that is also in demand is changing. And parents realize that, kids realize it, our educational institutes also realize it. And those conversations have happened.
Right.
So are people evolving? Yes. Are they evolving fast enough is always going to be a different question altogether.
Yeah.
The other way of looking at it is, Gaurav, is that let's take the analogy of a cricketer. Okay. So you have an Indian cricketer. We've traditionally not been the best at playing fast bowling, for example.
Sure.
So you have a kid who says, nahi yaar, मैं तो spin पे ही practice करूँगा. Because boss, when we are in India, I am king. And then you have a guy, let's just say a Virat Kohli, because he's in the news right now. Seems to be a guy who's gone out and said, I have to hone my art irrespective of where I am, irrespective of what gets thrown at me.
Right.
I need to deliver. I think this really is the attitude required for the kids when you talk of AI. What can AI do? Like today you're saying, okay, they may make these many jobs redundant. Fact is, by the time the kid lands up in the job market, there could be these many jobs because AI is also growing and it's going to become better and better and better. But if I have understood what is my core strength and I am continuously evolving, continuously learning,
Right.
I will definitely be ahead of this game. So conversation we have with kids is this, that at our time, we used to say, it's only a doctor and perhaps a lawyer who needs to continuously study. The rest of us, college khatam hua,
We're done.
sit back and we'll just count the bucks. Today, irrespective of which career you're going into,
So true.
you have to be mindful of the fact you're going to be a lifelong learner. There's going to be formal education, there's going to be short-term courses, there's going to be learning from peers, etc., etc. That is an attitude that is extremely critical.
Yeah, I think very valuable, advice. And I think truly today you have to be very nimble.
Yeah.
Pivoting is something that we all learned during the pandemic. And
Yes,
I think,
absolutely.
that pivoting is still important. And if you feel that there is a need to do that, you do that. And I think lifelong learning more pertinent than ever before.
Yeah, absolutely.
Coming back to the applications and colleges, letters of recommendation. Okay, a gray area for many. Thoughts on that as well.
They're a very powerful way for an educator, a school counselor, to share with the university their insights about the kid. So what are the stuff that they normally talk about? Or let's talk of what could be the worst kind of an LOR.
Right.
All the nice adjectives. Hardworking, industrious, caring.
Right.
That's not what they're looking for. They are looking for examples. They are looking for insights. That does this child understand what he is doing?
Right.
Is this child able to apply that knowledge? And how does this child behave in that classroom?
Right.
So these are the kind of insights that will come up when the school itself or the education system itself has project-based learning. Right. You have group projects. This will come up when a child takes initiative of something maybe outside the classroom, but something we always tell our students, make sure your teachers are in the loop what you're doing.
Right.
So even if you're going outside school and playing a tournament, no harm in just telling them. Keep them updated. You're doing a project on something, keep them updated. So letter of recommendation is a document that allows the university to view you through the perspective of an educator, their experience, their understanding of what a student should be. And if they're able to bring out that you're a good student of the subject, it's not about academics, that's there on the mark sheets.
Yeah.
A good student of the subject, someone who understands the subject, someone who understands and is willing to say what more can this subject offer.
Right.
It's a great document for the school to bring that out.
And hence this can be requested even prior to class 12. right? It can be even in an earlier class, or is it more normally a class 12 kind of thing?
So, okay, you can ask for it, but the way the current college application systems are, when you fill out the application, a link goes to a designated person in the school.
Correct.
So it only happens at the time of college application.
Got it.
For your own purposes. So let's say you're just building your own website, for example.
Right.
Many kids do that
Right.
today.
Right.
You work. There's been a Founders Day at school, annual day, and you've done some work over there, and you worked with X teacher.
Right.
By all means, ask them for an appreciation letter or something, and keep that in your records. It will not directly form a part of many college applications, but it's there as part of your portfolio, which you can showcase otherwise as well.
Yeah.
And that's a great idea. Why not?
Got it. This kind of builds up, like let's say testimonials. And
Absolutely.
things that kind
It
of
shows
build up your
persistence.
profile.
It shows consistency of effort.
Yeah. Couple of things I want to actually end with, and one of them will also be the aspect, of community service, because that is something that of course, people can kind of be forced upon them, saying that it'll build up a resume, but some will actually genuinely want to go ahead and do that. So your thoughts on community service, its importance, and what are you seeing in the space?
Okay, so again, I'll start with maybe the cons of it or the flip side. Fact is, Gaurav, if everyone was so involved in community service, within a few years, we won't require any community service.
Sure.
So understand, not everyone is cut out for it. If it is not something that pulls at you, there is no need to forcibly do it. Because again, doing 1 week, I went to an NGO and I taught them English, or I go to the temple once a year on, Falana ancestors, Barsi, and we distribute food. You're just taking up space on a college application.
Right.
If you're doing community service, the college is looking at consistency. How long have you done it? The second thing they want to understand is what impact has it had. So I went and taught kids for 1 year. Great. But moment I stepped out, what's happened to those kids?
Right.
Have I left them with a backup plan? Have I given them some skills that they can continue on that path? Or are they suddenly high and dry, कि Mandeep to college चले गए, हम तो मर गए. Second. The third thing is, are you able to tie it in with the other stuff that you're doing?
Right.
So whether it's your subject, whether it is certain other activities that again point to the fact that this is a socially responsible individual.
Right.
So these are the things that will come out through the college application.
Right.
And when the community service you've done will actually add to your application rather than ending up taking away from your application.
So once again, it has to be a long-term play. I mean, it's something that, it can't be that, I just did that one activity and that does nothing.
Gaurav, let's look at, we run our own companies. You work with so many companies. I've worked in the corporate sector. You're not going to reward someone just because they had one good week of sales.
Sure.
You're going to look at consistency. You're going to say, what does this guy do? And once you see those numbers, then you'll dig deeper and say, what does he do that is getting these numbers, or is just plain lucky?
Right.
Isko yaar XYZ company ka account mil gaya, so he's lucky. You may not be that forthcoming to reward that person.
Right.
You will dig deeper.
Yeah.
Colleges look at the college application in much the same way.
So two last questions, and one is going to be the ROI question, because a lot of people are like, okay, 40 lakh lagaya, 60 lakh lagaya, like, we invested up to maybe even a crore, a year, 3-year course. So you're talking about investment of anywhere between 1.5 crores to maybe as high as 4 crores as well. What kind of ROI are people expecting when they're coming to you? And have the prospects changed over the last couple of years based on, the global scenario as well?
Gaurav, the way we like to address this is break up the education and after education. Okay. First thing, there is nothing that mandates, so nothing tells you this has to happen in the same geography.
Fair.
I am going to study filmmaking.
Yeah.
With these variables that I feel are important.
Right.
California X college is the best place for me to do it.
Sure.
After that, if I get a job there, maybe great. But if I get an opportunity somewhere else, what's the harm? Another way to look at it is, if I go to the right place, a place that actually helps me hone those skills and grow in that field, it opens me up to opportunities anywhere else. Otherwise, people may not even look at me. So that's important to understand. Please do not look at it as saying, if I'm going to country X to study, तो मेरा ROI वहीं निकलेगा. I may end up coming back to India because fact is today India is amongst or maybe the fastest growing economy in the world.
It is.
The skill set that I will get in that ecosystem will be valued over here. Because for whatever reasons, Gaurav, education, we have to understand, is not just the classroom. It is outside the classroom, and the Indian education system cannot deliver that.
Right. Right.
We are still evolving. So when this kid goes out, whether he takes up a job at a KFC or a Pizza Hut,
Right.
or he does research over there or whatever else, just like we're talking about boarding schools.
Right.
Boarding school makes you a well-rounded individual.
Correct.
And that skill set is going to hold you instead till the day you die. So do not have a narrow perspective of ROI. The way we like to say it is, look at it as a ROI on yourself. Am I becoming a better person? Am I becoming a better professional? Am I becoming a better individual? And then you'll find that monetary calculation will change drastically.
Very powerful. I totally agree. And, and I think two very important points that you mentioned there. One is the fact that, yes, you go to a particular geography, US, UK, wherever you decide to go, India. The fact is that you got that education. Okay, now you have built up, that portfolio for yourself. You have that, new skill.
Correct.
You have, a lot that you picked up. And in case you didn't get a job in the States or in the UK or whatever, you do come back to, wherever you do eventually land up at.
Correct.
And there's still going to be a great return by
Absolutely.
virtue of the person that you've actually become and the experiences that you've had.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. And also, like you said, it's a long-term game. It's not like stock market में पैसा लगाया है
Correct.
अपना, आज ही return
आज ही
चाहिए.
return चाहिए.
One has to see, I think, and play the longer game. And I think that's very, very valuable as well. So, closing question. Okay, your top piece of advice, and could be multiple pieces of advice to children and parents who are coming in today and looking at their study abroad or study higher education in the country.
Top piece of advice, Gaurav, is you have to give it time. And there's an analogy I use. I call it the rule of the restaurant. So research shows that when you go to a restaurant, whether it's a QSR or it's a fine dining restaurant,
Right.
the percentage of time you spend in deciding what to eat is roughly about 7 to 8%.
Sure.
Okay. Apply that to your career. A typical career is 30 to 40 years.
Right.
7 to 8% of the time is 2 to 3 years.
Right.
Spend 2 to 3 years deciding, understanding what works for you.
Powerful.
How are you going to do it? Plethora of activities.
Right.
Okay. You could be playing a sport, you could be doing research, you could be shadowing someone, you could just be sitting in the library. But invest rather that time in yourself, invest that time in your child to really start narrowing down.
Yeah.
The advantage that kids today have, which we didn't have, is multiple opportunities. The biggest disadvantage is the noise that those multiple opportunities create. So our kids get distracted. They'll start something, switch off, start something, switch off. They need to dig deeper. And when you spoke earlier about, you asked me about a successful college applicant, I use this term well lopsided.
Right.
So what you're really saying is you should have the depth in your field while having the breadth in various other things so that you understand how other people function, how other things work. And that's really something which is our top advice to students, parents. Spend that time on yourself, understand what works for you, and whether you should go to country X, stay in India, top university X, those will flow from it. Those are not decisions you can just helicopter into and say today, chalo ji, aaj main ji yahan jata hu. So that's
Perfect.
it.
Perfect. So where can people find you? How can people get in touch with you? So where is Mindscan available? Handles, email, anything else that you'd like to share?
So we are based in Delhi in Noida, Sector 18. But yes, we are available on Instagram. My Instagram handle is mandeep.mindscan. We have our website, which is www.mindscan.edu.in. Easiest way to reach us is through the website. Our email IDs are there. Our telephone numbers are there. Instagram is there. And of course, as I said, our office is there in Noida as well.
Awesome. And again, thank you for doing what you did, not only for Nirvan, but for the countless, other students who you've helped over the years, and will continue to, of course, only multiply that.
Thank you
10x.
so much.
So, truly heartening to see what you guys are doing and what everyone has to say about you. So awesome. And, definitely do keep that up. Ladies and gentlemen, like I said, if higher education is your thing, if you have a child who is anywhere from as young as 11, going up to 17, 18, perhaps even already in college and looking at flips and, changes, I think great people to have that conversation with both Mandeep and Ishmeet, and someone I will totally vouch for. And in a very crowded space where trust is one thing that is lacking, and there are a lot of commercial arrangements that happen. I think here is one couple that really goes above and beyond, And it would be my recommendation that you definitely give them a look out for sure. And of course, we do have a gift hamper for you as well, since you did do the, you know, yes, there we have it. And just a few goodies for you for the exceptional
Awesome.
answers at the quick fire, rapid fire round. So we have from Shantu Nikhil, that's a passport holder. for
Thank
your
you so
travels
much.
When you're traveling. And also there's another luggage tag from Shantu Nikhil.
Oh, awesome.
It's something for you to take back to Ishmeet, the boardroom wow Taj dome candle, which is something for your home as well.
Thank you so much, Gaurav.
Just a little bit of stuff from our side. And of course, again, Mandeep, thank you so much. Been a pleasure. Known you many, many years. And my respect and admiration for what you do only grows with each person.
Thank you so much for having me here today, Gaurav. It was a pleasure.